That is right, people. We have returned. The battle for the throne has commenced. We are finishing up our Talkin' Thrones run right here, starting today. Season 4 premiere, Season 4, Episode 1, Two Swords. Professor Pat, it's good to have you back, man. How you been?
Been doing great, Dom. And, I'm going to say this. I think the Talking TV podcast family, Two swords is not enough, Dom. It's Legend of Zelda had 4 swords, and I think we're missing 2 somewhere along the lines.
I miss this.
Hey, Tywin just ain't cutting it. He could have done 4 swords for 4 links.
Tywin's slacking, as we're gonna see, and oh man, I miss this. Talking Thrones, we're back. Oh, man, on point as ever with those jokes. Good to have you back, Pat. Good to be back here talking about one of our respective favorite shows of all time. I don't know if this is still necessarily our favorite show, respectively. I know how much of a sci-fi head you are. I've famously been open about my love of crime shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad. But it's still good to know that Game of Thrones holds a special place in our heart. We're back in the new year. It's 2022. Yeah. We've got the first Game of Thrones spinoff, House of the Dragon, coming out later this year.
That's gonna be cool, Dom. I think it's one of those things where, I don't know if Game of Thrones is my favorite show of all time. I really do appreciate it. I really have fun watching it. This is my 3rd time watching through this series. 2 of those times are mainly because of you. So
you're welcome.
You influenced me to go through it and really analyze the material as much as I had time for and talk Thrones with you here on the podcast channel. So, the main thing is, I really do appreciate it. I think the long form storytelling is top notch. But, hey, it's shows like The Expanse, Dark Matter, even this new one Amazon, has come up with recently, Wheel of Time.
The Wheel of Time. I was going to ask if you'd gotten into that.
It's a pretty good fantasy. I feel like the season 1 is, at the time of this recording, that's where we're up to right now. And for the most part, I feel like it's sort of lacking. It's got that season 1 sort of,
very much so.
Foot in the water. We're testing out the pool. We're seeing if we have an audience for this type of thing. And, I've seen a couple articles that are like, oh, this is the next Game of Thrones. And, I feel like a lot of, clickbait is centered around comparing all these new shows to Game of Thrones. And, I don't think you can really do that. It's very specific, medieval times, basically, fighting for positions, backstabbing, all the sort of, known stories from that time period, made into its own fantasy world. So I think it's pretty unique. It still holds up as unique. And all these other new shows that are coming out, you should just enjoy them for what they are. They're kind of their own separate thing. And, I don't think any critic should really compare things to Game of Thrones.
Well, look, critics constantly trying to compare things to the previous, It show is unfortunately a thing that will not be going away soon. But yeah, man, it's just, you constantly hear that phrase of all these new shows coming out. They're trying to be again, substitute Game of Thrones for any of the last 15 shows were the previous It show. Before Game of Thrones it was Lost. Before Lost it was, and in between that it was Breaking Bad. You have all these shows that are constantly trying to reclaim the title. And the sad, simple fact is that, look, those shows earned those top spots for a reason that really had nothing to do with ultimately, what it is that their shows were intending for. And ultimately, I find that the It show of the moment has a lot to do with the zeitgeist surrounding the show rather than the actual show. It just also helps that, the shows in question, usually for the most part, really measure up to quality. And Game of Thrones, still, even if in its darkest, worst moments, still has a level of quality that is just unparalleled by really a lot of other shows. It's interesting because we're here to talk about the season 4 premiere, Two Swords, and season 4 is a very peculiar beast within the run of the show. I like to call it, let's call it the soft reboot season. We kind of ended the first phase of where we were at within Game of Thrones. Obviously, we're still seeing the repercussions of the Red Wedding, but the Starks are, at least the main Starks are largely gone. They've mostly been relegated to ancillary positions. You still have Jon at the Wall, you still have Sansa, you still have Arya, you still have Bran, but all the other main Starks are dead. The Lannisters are officially officially now in charge. But the interesting thing too, just as far as its comparison to where we leave off within the books, as well as, the massive amount of other secondary characters that were introduced to this season. This season also kind of signifies a new direction for the show. Famously, this is not the end of the book that it was adapting the way that seasons 1 and 2 were perfectly adapted. Famously, season 3, as I said, in our wherever we left off, the first
our
show,
season 3 finale,
season 3 finale,
basically the last episode before this one. Check it out on the YouTube channel or download it on podcast. Absolutely. If you haven't listened to it. Hey, I agree with you, that the show, definitely splits off in a new direction. In terms of the books, I think where you're going with this is that it kind of, if I didn't read the book, so I'm not as familiar. But my understanding from our conversations is that it kind of split the material of the third book, right, into 2 seasons.
Essentially, yeah, but not really like a perfect half and half sort of a thing like Dune did. More so the matter of season 3 is the bulk of A Storm of Swords. That's what's so interesting about season 4 is that season 4 takes literally the last third. It takes essentially because after the Red Wedding, there are really only 2 more major events, that being Joffrey's wedding and the Battle of the Wall, and all the little moments that happen in between. Oberyn Martell is a character that takes up very precious little pages of book time. So the fact that they're able to take really relatively little story material, I can even pull it from my bookshelf right there, A Storm of Swords, and show you just how much it is that they have to adapt into season 4. And the fact that they managed to turn that arguably into, for me at least, one of the most compelling seasons of the show. Season 4, I've been on record on saying that season 4 is one of, if not my favorite season of the entire show. There are so many just epic, incredible moments, both from an action standpoint, from a character standpoint. The budget is continuing to increase. We're still not at the level that we'd be at for the last 4 seasons, but it's definitely getting there. Again, we get such iconic moments like Joffrey's wedding, Oberyn Martell versus Gregor Clegane, famously the Mountain and the Viper, the Battle of the Wall, Tyrion's trial. So many iconic, crazy, awesome moments happen in this season. But let's start right at the beginning. Let's start right at the first episode.
I just want to add before we do that is basically, it's a testament to the long form storytelling of the show. Essentially they're able to take a smaller portion of book 3 and basically, just time it and build the world and build up these characters, and give a development properly for not only a really good season here in season 4, but I would say a really fantastic season 5, and even going into the future, the seasons still remain pretty awesome. Up until they kind of rushed it towards the end, but
we'll get to that when we get to
that's a debate that we get to.
We'll get to that when we get to it. Like we said, this show is all about trying to figure out where it is that this show goes wrong. Ultimately, figuring out where it starts to deviate. Again, even though this season is still pretty faithful to the book, we do still start to see a little bit of deviation here. But we start with arguably the cold open to end all cold opens. If I'm not mistaken, I think this might be. No, sorry. So this is the third of 3 cold opens that we get of the season premieres. We obviously got the cold open from the first season with the Rangers going out and having their encounter with the White Walkers. We have the cold open for the beginning of season 3 with the White Walkers. This is the first cold open to not involve the White Walkers. And in fact, largely this season, this is a largely White Walker free season. I think we only get really the one scene, mostly because I feel like this season is all focused on wrapping up all of the conflicts that were established in the previous season, specifically amongst the humans, all the conflict that happens in King's Landing, where, we literally have the Night's Watch now preparing for the battle that's coming in the wall. You have Daenerys continuing her trek towards Meereen. She still has the third of the 3 slave cities to conquer. But we start with, in my opinion, the cold open to end all cold opens. And it's pretty hard to top.
Yeah, it's just
cold open that came from last season. But
it's Tywin, really just smirking up a storm.
Oh man,
he is as happy as can be, right? It's basically Robb Stark's sword, right? It's his sword.
Well, no, Ned's sword.
Well, I guess Ned's sword.
Ned.
So that's interesting because I thought it was Ned's sword, but at the same time, it's he waited this long. I guess when you're calling one of 3 blacksmiths in the world that can handle this material and repurpose it, it takes a couple months for them to get into town. So it's very weird cold open, as you said.
Well, I'm surprised he didn't have Varys teleport them there.
Yeah, hey, listen, it's just one of those things. I appreciate the scene, but also it made me think. Really, they've been holding on to the Ned Stark sword so long, or did Robb have it?
That long?
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you could have put that to good use, or done this earlier. But ultimately, it's a very nice scene of, basically showing a nice montage of Tywin just really enjoying a day at the blacksmith, and it's like making two swords with the gentleman there, and that's it. It's a really simple scene. It's really just it's some special characterization where Tywin is taking the time to really reforge this big sword into two swords. And it obviously comes up and comes into play when Tywin finally speaks to Jaime and offers him, the bigger of the two swords that he has forged.
Yeah, all joking aside, it is the very symbolic representation of the Lannisters' ultimate victory over the Starks that they achieved last season. Tywin, again, is literally taking ice, which was this massive symbol for, the Starks. Ned had that great sword. It had been in his family for generations. He's taking it, he's breaking it down, ultimately showing that the Lannisters have won, and then he's quite literally taking the wolf pelt that it was contained in and throwing it into the flames. Like, this episode to me is just, again, Game of Thrones premieres have often been accused of kind of being the recap of the previous season, and this episode falls a little bit victim to that, but I definitely think that as far as continuing what the finale of season 3 did, as far as reinforcing just how impactful this event, the Red Wedding, was, job well done. And like you said, it is continuing the next season. We spend, unlike last season, we spend a significant amount of time, and there was a significant amount of stuff that happens in King's Landing this season. Again, a bulk of this episode happens there. We start off with one of several moments that revolve around Jaime. Jaime is a very crucial character for this episode and this season. This is ultimately the continuation of kind of his transformation and his kind of
his transformation into a one-hand knight, right?
Exactly, as everyone constantly seeks to remind him.
Yeah, it's like this. He's looking at the sword and he's like bouncing it. He's like, "This is perfect. I think it's fresh forged," and he's appreciating the work, right? And Tywin is just like smirking and nodding, and he's like, "Yeah, there's only 3 blacksmiths in the world."
I was having a smirk fest this episode. He's like, "Finally, I've gotten everything that I want. Tyrion is out of my way. My prized son has come home. The Starks are all gone. I can finally."
It's one of those things where it's like, he's telling him exactly how many people in the world, are known to be able to rework this steel and, all the facts about it. Like, he's really giddy and excited to hand this sword over to his son, until the conversation turns towards, okay, Jaime, it's time to, put up the boots, and leave the sword in the, basically, I guess, leave the Kingsguard uniform, the armor, right there at the castle and go hang out at Casterly Rock and, really take his place as, Lord Lannister, the heir to the, Lannister name,
Yeah, it's an interesting parallel to the conversation that he had with Tyrion at the beginning of last season, where the last season Tyrion is kind of like trying to get out of King's Landing. He's like, "Look, I've done my part for the family. I want what's owed to me," and Tywin will not begrudge him anything. And now Tywin is trying to gift, the prized heir, his son, the thing that he's wanted his entire life, and Jaime refuses. And once again, continuing to reinforce Tywin's fatal flaw is only seeing his children as commodities, and that he's never really understood what it is they want. And while Jaime is very smartly keeping his motivations clouded from his father, there is something interesting there, which is that it's like, look, I've destroyed pretty much everything else. I know what our family's done in order to achieve this. So at the very least, I'm going to make this one small moment in order to show this, okay, we can keep our word, despite the fact that, the fact that anyone would still trust a Lannister at this point, I think is kind of hilarious in hindsight. So if anything, it kind of I think does more of a degradation to that proclamation than anything else, especially knowing where Jaime's true reasons for that. But of course, it results in something in an interesting turnout, which is where Tywin kind of disowns him. He's like, look, a one-handed man with no family is going to need all the help he can get. He's like, I assume that you're going to want the sword back since I'm not deserting it. And obviously, Tywin has that thing with legacy, but we all know that that's bullshit at this point. So it kind of leads into the couple of interesting scenes that happen with Jaime. Again, King's Landing kind of rotates back and forth between Jaime and Tyrion throughout this entire season. But the next scene that we have, very comedic scene. Once again, we get the trio.
Well, it's Tyrion, welcoming in. Oh, you're going. Oh, yeah. They're all hanging out. Bronn,
yeah, they're
Podrick.
all hanging out. Right, and they're waiting for the Dornish to arrive.
Exactly, and Tyrion's talking up his, diplomat skills. Like, yeah, I'm a great diplomat. There's some bad blood between the Martells and Lannisters. so for the most part, the scene happens where, they start coming in the distance. They're riding in on their horses. They got their banners. And, this is one of those weird touches. Like, Tyrion is like, oh, can you read the banners? Can you see them in the distance? Almost like he's blind. I don't know why they took that direction with this scene. And then Bronn is squinting and he doesn't recognize any of the symbols, presumably because he's only been a knight for a week and a couple days or whatever it is.
However long
at this point,
season 3 took place over, because the timing of season 3 was really weird.
Yeah, and then Podrick is just like, he's like, a ferret, and he's like has his neck up and he's like looking in the distance and he's like, yeah, it's this house and that house, and he just knows all the Martell houses, and of course they don't see Dr. Bashir's.
Prince, whoever his character is in The Expanse. Yeah, Prince Doran Martell.
Well, it's Deep Space Nine. I'm sorry, another actor from
another sci-fi reference there. Yeah, Alexander Siddiq. Well, for me, I know him as the dude who is the Shah's right hand man from Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven. The dude that Orlando Bloom first comes into contact with. Finally watched that movie, by the way. You were right, man. Fucking fantastic.
Yeah, we could go on and talk about that forever. I think that movie is fantastic.
Also, not the only Game of Thrones actor that's in that movie. You got Jamie and Jorah Mormont are in that movie too for like 5 seconds at a time. Also, Craster is in the first 5 minutes of that movie. Really strange how many Game of Thrones actors are in that.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, it's one of those things where when they as the seasons have progressed and they introduce new characters, and just the people that they get to play these roles are really spot on. And it's a little bit of a spoiler, but this is kind of a recap show. You probably have seen the series by now.
As if you hadn't already watched the first 30 episodes that we did. We are fully spoiling the show. There are no non-spoiler things here. But
the fact is, it's the Martells are very underutilized throughout the show, and they have such a great setup with this season, with Oberyn and just who he is, and and basically what happens to him, and then you expect in season 5 and 6 for the Martell revenge to really escalate into something that's akin of the Stark Lannister war, right. Maybe even a little more deadly, and then it sort of just like gets usurped by the fact that, oh man, we got to
wrap up. We only got 3 seasons.
We have Daenerys and Stannis and all these other characters. So like it basically, it doesn't, it's really good. It's really good. It's really good. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they did that,
let's bring it to arguably like this is the scene of the episode right here. Tyrion, they're waiting for Prince Doran. They're told, okay, because of his condition, because Doran's got some sort of condition, Doran had to remain in Sunspear, so we sent his brother Oberyn, and you can immediately see just all the color drain from Tyrion's face, where he's like, oh no, we got the hot-headed younger brother. Cut to Littlefinger's brothel, and we get the introduction again. It put him on the map. He had acted before, but this dude has been a superstar. The Mandalorian Din Djarin himself, Pedro Pascal as Prince Oberyn Martell. God, we talked about Lady Olenna's introduction last season, but
this show really blew him up, right? He basically was in Narcos. He was in, as you just said,
because he went right from
Mandalorian,
Narcos, and then he goes right from Narcos to Mandalorian. So
and he's been in some movies too, and he's just like a really
not
fantastic actor.
The movie front, I would say.
He's not Dwayne the Rock Johnson yet, but he is. Maybe he's the Dwayne Rock Johnson of TV shows. I don't know.
Maybe.
You let us know.
Could very well be. But yeah, this dude comes in like a literal firecracker. He's inspecting. He's inspecting prostitutes in order to sleep with him and his paramour Elaria Sand. Introduction there. Another Luther alumni there, Indira Varma, as John Luther's wife, who unfortunately passed in the first season. And I love the introduction here, and like kind of the whole thing that's done. They call her a lady. She's like, oh, I'm not a lady. You're gonna refer to me as you should, as a bastard. And it immediately shows that the Dornish do not play by the rest of the rules of Westeros, as we come to later find out. Of course, you hear some some Lannisters soldiers singing.
Yeah, singing in the next chamber,
singing
and
the Reigns
then
of Castamere in the next chamber. I just love how this scene goes. Like, how does the lines go? He's like, what's it called? Again, the insult comes from when they see Ilaria and they immediately mistake her for a prostitute, and he's like, you know why all the world hates a Lannister? You have your gold lions and your gold. You think that. What is it? You think that you're better than everyone else, You're not a golden lion. You're a little pink man who's far too slow in the draw. And the dude reaches for a sword, and of course, mistakenly, they don't know who they're dealing with here. This is,
yeah, exactly. They just think he's some Dornish guy, and hey, we need to really talk down to him, and we hate him. We need to make him feel terrible. Like, it's a Lannister brothel, so it's like the two of them versus him, plus whoever else is waiting in the wings in the next room over. It's one of those things where they feel pretty confident, and you're right. They don't really know that Oberyn is a prince and that he's a famed swordsman in his own right. And listen, he just goes ahead with a dagger and stabs the guy through a wrist as his hand touches his the hilt of his sword, and he just looks at the other friend and he's like, listen, this
dude's gonna die. You can get him help, or you can kill me.
Yeah, it's like, I'll pull this blade out, and if you get him help right away, you'll save his life. Otherwise, you can make your other decisions. And that's when Tyrion walks in, and
it's so well done. It's so well done. Yeah. And of course, he immediately starts making out with Alara. Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah,
even my Game of Thrones character introductions, which are pretty fantastic to begin with, this is like, this might take the top spot. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, Tyrion is nervous, and rightfully so, because Oberyn is the one that's really going to take the revenge, which we do learn. Basically, the two daughters that the Mountain killed.
Yes,
when King's Landing was sacked, right?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because again, like, it's a very interesting relationship is formed here between Tyrion and Oberyn as they're walking outside. As kind of like, as Tyrion admits, they're both kind of like the more disappointing sons. Oberyn always wanted to go off into the world. He wanted to explore. He was never interested in politics or ruling or anything like that, much to the chagrin of the rest of his family. Tyrion, as such, has always been kind of looked down as the black sheep of this family. And they formed this very interesting relationship that ultimately results in Oberyn representing Tyrion as his champion when his trial by combat eventually comes. And the thing that's established here is that is that they both choose to be honest in a world largely made of dishonesty, because Tyrion's like, look, we both know that you're a troublemaker wherever you go. You're a warrior, you're a killer, you're not here to just attend a wedding to represent your family. That's not what you do. So why don't you tell me why you're really here? And Oberyn straight up tells him, is like, look, what your family, the sin that your family committed against my family, this hideous sin, obviously, besides the fact of, the whole thing starting with Rhaegar Targaryen ultimately cheating on Elia with Lyanna, but the fact that Gregor Clegane, obviously famously brutal, it's something that's been well known throughout the history of Robert's Rebellion, but the fact that when the sack of King's Landing happened, the Mountain Clegane brutally raped and murdered Oberyn and Doran's sister Elia, and then killed her two children very, very viciously. And Oberyn's there for a bit.
It's also, Oberyn brings up the whole point. It's like, the Mountain may not be here right now, but Tywin,
I know who his master.
Yeah, Tywin must have given the order, right? To do this, and so he's partly responsible. So the fact is, he is there for blood, whether it be the Mountain or whether it be Tywin, or any other way of probably hurting Tywin. We don't really know, and Tyrion really doesn't know. And I think this is a really good setup. It's like teaming up Tyrion with Oberyn in this first episode, having him investigate, who this new character is and what he's there to do. It's really smart because, the audience at this point feels really comfortable with Tyrion, and to really kind of, discover this new character and what he's about and set things up for the season yet to come is, it really kind of right off the bat gets us up to speed to where we need to be with the Martells.
Yeah, and Tyrion's sweating even harder because on top of all of the pressure that he was already dealing with everything since he first arrived in King's Landing 2 seasons ago, now he's got to deal with this guy who, even though he was not directly involved in any way, shape, or form with this murder that his family is very well known for, he already knows, oh shit, I'm on this guy's hit list just by nature of my last name. Once again, causing Tyrion to question his position, his loyalty A couple more scenes in this episode. Tyrion then goes to sit down with Sansa, ultimately, who just, oh my God, Sansa. Oh man, just when you thought you couldn't get any worse. And the worst part is, this is not even the end of her torment, but you just see she is just broken. She is just broken. Everything has been ripped away.
My favorite part of this, my favorite part of this scene is it starts with, Shay. Yeah. So Shay's sitting there like, have a lemon cake. You love lemon cake. She's like begging with her, like have a lemon cake for heaven's sake. And, it's like she's not hungry. And Tyrion walks into this and it's like, you got to tell her to eat. And it's like, even Tyrion like rewords it where it's like, you need substance, you need to continue. Like he doesn't really sugarcoat it or anything like that. He just like matter of factly, tells her in a logical way. And it's one of those things where it's like, Sansa is really, at the bottom, of her emotions. Like she is officially at this point broken. And, she goes, hey, I'm going to go hang out in the Godswood. And Tyrion is like, well, that's good. Praying is good. And she's like,
no, I'm not there to pray. I'm just going there because it's the only place that no one will to come and bother me.
Yeah. And it's like, so she doesn't even believe anymore that the gods exist, and it's one of those things where for a character like Sansa, who started off with this like really like misguided vision, like, oh, Joffrey's a prince and I'm gonna marry him and everything's gonna be just great, it's gonna be fantastic, and he is a vicious torturer, murderer, killer, and like just likes to play sadistic games with people, and like totally just not the person that she thinks a prince should be. And her family's murdered, and her, father, brother, everybody. It's like, the fact is, she's imprisoned here in King's Landing, and it's like, she doesn't see any way out, any option that's good. And she's totally defeated, and she doesn't even pray anymore. And I think that's a really good setup for where she's at. And, there's only one place to go when you reach that rock bottom status, and that's forward.
Yeah, that's forward and up. Yeah, and as we see with the hints that are hinted at next episode, that brief moment where, Jaime and Brienne are keeping an eye on her, but then you have obviously her run-in with Dantos Hollard, who again is a character that, if not for him kind of literally reminding you would have almost forgotten about, with his introduction 2 seasons ago in the season 2 premiere. But she's in the Godswood. Dantos tracks her down. He makes up this bullshit story about how, oh, you saved me. I'm a fool. I'm no longer a knight, but I've got this proud family heritage and all. And he gives her this necklace. And he's like, oh, it's a family heirloom, Again, like, it's so strange because even after everything has been stripped of her, she still is willing to extend a little bit of that faith in humanity. And as we come to learn, it is so misplaced because he is been placed there by Littlefinger.
I think this scene is upon first watch, it's really well done. I think they're distracting us with the sort of like, horror film, her running through the woods and someone's, like Michael Myers is like clearly chasing her.
The first time.
No, I think that's on purpose. I think it's distracting because, like, obviously he's part of Joffrey's wedding. Like, he's sort of a little bit of a pawn, in that game. And, it kind of gets Sansa involved as well. And so the way they introduce this, filmmaking wise, is a distraction, and I think that's it's really smart filmmaking because it's you're overhyping and over sensationalizing him bumping into her. It's like she thought she was about to have to get the pepper spray out and spray him down. I know it doesn't exist in Game of Thrones world, but like,
I wonder what the Game of Thrones equivalent of pepper spray would be.
I don't know, but like, she was about to have to, fight for her life, for a second time or third time, whatever it is at this point. And it turns out, it's just, this friendly former knight turned fool by Joffrey, that she spoke up for. and really saved his life. And I think it's a really touching line as well. It's like, anybody would have done the same. And he goes, no, you're the only one who did it. And so, I think that really goes for him to sell the whole situation. And she takes the necklace, and I know it has implications for, Joffrey's wedding and later on in the season, or it doesn't even get revealed the plot until later on, like in future seasons. But the fact is, it's really set up really well. It's a kind of self-contained scene, and it allows the seed to be planted for a reveal much later down the line, that this is really the start of the Joffrey wedding plot.
Yes, most definitely. So this brings up an interesting point, though, that I wanted to do before we cover the rest of King's Landing, which is that Sansa as a character, she came under a little bit of criticism in the last couple of seasons for the fact that Sansa, at the end of the day, as much as hardened of an exterior she got over the course of the couple seasons just because of the amount of traumatic events that she had to go through, there was a little bit of criticism that was levied is that in the last 2 seasons specifically, she started acting out of character because at the end of the day, despite how untrustworthy and rightfully so she was of the forces that they ended up contending with in the last 2 seasons, the fact of the matter is it kind of deviated almost from her character that at the end of the day, Sansa always was a caring individual. She was always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, even if she doesn't necessarily trust them. So do you think that the last couple seasons betray that character arc, especially since it's established in this episode in particular that even after everything that she'd been through, all the torture, all the abuse, everything that, losing her entire family within the first 3 seasons, she still is willing to care for and give people the benefit of the doubt, even though it's consistently ripped away. Dantos, Robin, when she gets to the Vale, Littlefinger murdering her aunt, and obviously, don't even get me started on once we get to Ramsay, but I don't know. I just wanted to get your take on that real quick.
I'll say this is like, no matter what Joffrey and the rest of the Lannisters did to Sansa, she, may be sort of in a down place, near bottom, so to speak. But the fact is, like, compared to what Ramsay ends up doing in terms of torturing her, what he's done with Theon, aka Reek, the fact is, when she goes and she is in Winterfell living with Ramsay Bolton, it's one of those things where it's amplified. Everything that happened to her in the past is, just a small drop in the bucket. And the fact is, like, Ramsay actually torments her and changes her personality. Just like, he changed Theon into Reek. But I think Sansa, didn't, change into a broken, weakened, man.
Right.
Sansa actually, sort of took the experience, I would say was broken by it, but comes out the other end, essentially as someone that's a little colder, a little more ruthless. She, her innocence is totally destroyed, and it's really, trying to get the upper hand, trying to do the things that she thinks that, her father, her brother Rob, even towards the end of the series, Jon Snow is not properly doing,
right.
not taking their opponents as seriously as they should.
Yeah, and I guess the biggest source of confusion for that, just in the sense of where she goes, is because again, the event that happens obviously with Ramsay raping Sansa in season 5 does not happen in the books. It's a completely different character that he does that to. It's actually a friend of Sansa's who actually the Lannisters masquerade as Arya Stark in order to again continue this in order to continue the alliance between the Lannisters and the Boltons, via that. So I think that's. So I guess that's just an interesting little tidbit that I wanted to bring up, because again, like I said, this season is really where the deviations between the books and the show really continue. So only a couple more.
What I'll just say is about the, it's when we're doing the show Talking Thrones, it's great to hear where the show and the books deviate, because I think, there's obviously 3 types of fans: the people that enjoyed the books and the show. There's people that just enjoyed the books and might not have seen the show, might just have been like, I don't watch TV. And then there's people that, like me, who just enjoyed the show, didn't really see it necessary to jump into the books and go ahead and read the books. So it's one of those things where I think the show stands on its own. and the changes they make, if you're a book fan, you might be disappointed, but at the end of the day, it's like you're making something for television. So a lot of times, with big source material like George R. R. Martin's books, you got to consolidate, you got to combine characters a little bit, just for the sake of screen time. Like, you just don't have an unlimited amount of minutes that you can produce. And so, it's like, take the best things, put them to the most important characters, and, really keep the essence of the story, but go ahead and make it, actually for the screen as best you can. So, I think from an analytical point of view, like, I enjoy when you bring in those moments of the books and how things differ. It's really helpful to appreciate the show, but I think, audience members, at least the, ones that can separate the books and the TV show and really be analytical about both, and what makes both stories or versions of the story great. I think that's going to help people get the best appreciation of this particular world.
For sure. A couple more scenes. Another scene with two scenes with Jamie. First, the scene with him and Cersei. I think this is a really interesting scene and a really interesting, like, kind of continuation of the brief moment that we got with the two of them reuniting in the finale, where Qyburn fits him with the golden hand. I just, again, Cersei is just continuing with the one-liners here, where she's like, "Oh, it took that Smith the better part of a couple days." She's like, and Jamie gives her a look. He's like, "Really?" And she's like, "All right, half a day." I thought that was hilarious. And then, again, the starting of the, the interesting Cersei Qyburn relationship, where she's like, "Thank you, Maester Qyburn." He's like, "Not a Maester." Again, dropping the hints of, like, again, these people who are not of their titles, but are showing how the lowborn can rise to those positions of higher authority. And Jamie reveals his true motivation as to why he really wanted to stay on the King's Guard, so he can stay in King's Landing, nice and close to Cersei. But Cersei immediately tells him, again, kind of continuing this theme of, like, Jamie is starting to feel like this alienation. He may have been gone a little bit too long. Things have changed drastically since.
Well, Cersei says that, right? It's like, you took too long. He says something to the effect of, like, "I've killed people to be here," and she just responds bluntly, "You took too long."
Yeah.
And the fact is, maybe, she's right. That's what she's feeling, and she feels kind of abandoned. She feels like everything that she's had to endure, which is, Tywin coming into town and saying, like, what does she say? She calls Lawrence a pillow biter.
The most famous pillow biter in the land.
Yeah, exactly. She's degrading her, future husband because, he's young, he's dumb, and, clearly he has,
do I dare use the
secret, this open secret.
Do I dare use the infamous line from Point Break there?
I don't remember the
line
from Point Break.
Well, you did the first two verses, so I assumed that you knew it. I feel like you were setting me up for that one.
Hey, listen, I've seen Point Break, but it's been a while. So
young, dumb, full of cum.
Oh God, that's that's a little X-rated there, Dom.
I think bit. Not the first time I've dropped one of those. Won't be the last.
Yeah, you better put if you put this clip up there on YouTube, you better mark that explicit.
I better put the little the mouth bar over it.
Yeah, I would censor. That's just good media practice. But hey, the fact is, Point Break. It's a very awesome rated R action film. Go ahead and see it. I don't think any Game of Thrones alumni made it to it.
Don't think so. Although, how interesting it would have been if Swayze had showed, if Swayze was still alive and Swayze showed up in that last season as that very doomed leader of the Golden Company that was in 2 episodes and then immediately got killed. But,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, if Swayze could have been fit into Game of Thrones, like, I that would be very interesting. I don't think anybody would have expected that.
Yeah, but it pays off, interestingly enough. Again, even though I still don't think that this was the way that this storyline was meant to be resolved, it pays off, obviously, in more of the setup with Jamie and Brienne, their moment that they have after his moment with Cersei.
When they're looking at Sansa.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
The sad sap that she is, This is before Donna.
And he's like, "See, she's fine." And she looks at him and she's like, "Really?" And then she kind of like tries to maintain him, say it's like, you have to maintain your vow. And he's like, "How? everyone that she knows is dead. She's about to be. She's not even, a Stark anymore. She's a Lannister or an Arya Stark. She hasn't been seen since Ned Stark's execution. Where would you think she is? My wager would be on dead. Ultimately showing that like there's a little bit of flaws to Brienne's plan now that Cat and all the rest of the Starks are dead. But Brienne does bring up one solid point, which is that you really think she's gonna be safe here, and that leads into probably like one of my favorite exchanges, which is, of course, Olenna. You have to have a little insert with Olenna since we're in King's Landing, with her talking with the rest of her Tyrell cousins, and she just, again, just shooting threes. Every time she comes on screen, she just knows exactly what she's doing. She just picks up a necklace. She's like, all these necklaces are garbage. You have to look the best on your wedding day. Your grandfather gave me something great like this, tosses it off the ledge, and she's like, grandmother, you have to behave. And she's like, nonsense, I can do whatever I want. And then Brienne comes in, and she's like, oh my God, you are so splendid. I hear that you knocked my grandson off his horse like the silly little boy that he is. Again, just every one-liner that comes out of her mouth. Amazing.
Yeah, well, she's it's a character that is just like kind of Oberyn, right? She's very open, very honest. Although, Marjorie, says some line about Joffrey wearing dead sparrows, and giving her a necklace of dead sparrows.
Again, another very subtle hint at the plan that's coming, that's about to be executed.
Yeah, but it's also like that Joffrey is some intellectually deficient, sadist, and she's openly, but she's openly joking about it. And, Olenna is basically like, don't even joke, or say that in my presence. And I think she's right. Cause once you put that out in the world, it becomes a habit. Like you're used to saying things negative like that, and specifically like all she has to do is say it in front of Joffrey accidentally, almost like a reaction, or say it in front of someone in the court that's going to be a stooge and report it to Joffrey, someone that he would trust enough to get him angry and hot-headed over it, because we know what happens when he gets angry.
Yes,
you're not going to like it when Joffrey gets angry, because
it's worse than the Hulk. He's going to stick you with crossbows.
It's one of two things happens. He either, like you said, he gets you with a crossbow, or the person that he, is getting him angry just slaps him and he screams like a girl. So his weakness. Just as long as you can slap him and put him in your place, you're fine. You're good.
So as long as you're Cersei Lannister, you're fine. You can basically, or Tyrion, which that leads into last two scenes that I forgot. Oh my God, there's so much that happens in King's Landing in this episode. I don't know if we're ever going to get to the other storylines, but you have Tyrion meeting with Shay, and continuing with the whole Tyrion. I think is just lost. I don't know if this is a situation where Tyrion has just lost interest in Shay, or the fact that Tyrion just got literally an anvil hanging over his head at every minute that he just literally cannot focus on anything. And
I think it goes to the scene with Varys, right? He goes and gives her the diamonds, says, "Get out of here, live a new life."
Because again, Tyrion does make it seem like he has no idea what she's talking about with the diamonds. So that does lead.
Is it ever revealed? Is it ever revealed that he put Varys up to it?
I don't think so. Well, the whole thing is that he plays dumb. Either he's really, really convincing at playing dumb, or he legitimately doesn't know what's going on. But I do think that does spark the idea in his mind to send her away, as we see in the next episode.
Yeah, I think, for the most part, I think we discussed this when it happened, but I do believe that Varys, he did this on his own. Like, Tyrion is someone that cannot be distracted. He needs to be playing the Game of Thrones. Shay, they may be in love, or some form of love, but it's not going to work out, because it's just going to get the two of them killed, and maybe drag Sansa into it and get her killed as well. So it's not for the good of the realm, as Varys would say. And Tyrion, tends to lean towards Varys. It's one of the reasons why, later in the show, they team up for a buddy road trip, in Esteros.
What Essos? Yeah, famously this is one of the only episodes that does not feature Varys or Littlefinger in any capacity since the first couple of episodes before we were.
Yeah, their names are dropped, but
indeed.
they're not there.
Indeed, yeah, and that brings us to one of my favorite scenes, another one of my favorite scenes in this episode, the scene where Jaime and Meryn Trant are planning out the security defense of Joffrey's wedding while Joffrey's there, and Joffrey starts flipping through the book of the Kingsguard members and, points out, Sir Arthur Dayne, and then points out Jaime is like, oh, your famous deeds. Again, just every Lannister in this episode, Tywin, Cersei, Joffrey, they're all just throwing shade at Jaime, unnecessarily rather, and consistently pointing out, yeah, you were captured, you're kind of useless, you don't have a hand now. Again, and I do find it interesting that each and every one of those characters, 2 out of those 3 characters are dead by the end of this season. So I do find that very, very interesting.
I think for Jaime, he's lost his place within the group, right? Yes. It's like he was out fighting the war. He got captured. He's been running around in the backwaters, getting his hand chopped off and fighting bears and, really pouring out his heart to Brienne. And, it's like he's totally a changed person. Like the whole conversation about Sansa's safety and, living up to his oath and all that type of stuff. It's like, we, the viewer, can see that his allegiance has changed, that he's gone through this character arc. And that's going to be one of the things that he continues to fight with is, how does he take these extreme members of his family, people acting, out of extreme, hatred for other people, extreme desire for power, absolute power. Like, how does he make them a little more moderate and, really get them to, just have a little more honor? It's like he even with that scene with Tywin is talking about, just how his name is disgraced and, how he's the Kingslayer and how, he's done this. And, it's like him leaving the King's Guard is breaking another vow, right? He's supposed to be in it for life. And the fact is, like, he doesn't, obviously he has the motivation of staying near Cersei. But the fact is he's not wrong. Like, his name is, there's nothing good to put in those pages. And that's probably why, he's never had anything committed there. Because all the good that he's done is, it's the eye of the beholder, and everything that he's done is really not well known and it's not championed. It's only the negative aspects of things, the perception that he's the Kingslayer that is really there. That's his legacy, and even though it shouldn't be.
Yes, most definitely. And again, more subtle hinting and foreshadowing at the finale, obviously, once we see him close the Kingsguard book, as we see once Brienne ultimately finishes putting down all of his deeds in the finale. Again, we'll get to this once we get to the finale, but one of the few things I think that the finale did get right. But let's get to the rest of this episode, because far be it from us to say that, again, there was other things that did happen in this episode outside of King's Landing. Again, this episode was primarily focused on King's Landing, but first let's stop in Meereen, or rather on the road to Meereen. We check back in with Daenerys. She's relaxing in her field. She's taking a little break in between, liberating slaves, and she sees, again, her dragons are growing up, and they are getting into their adolescent phase they ever did. They're getting more vicious. They're roasting lambs. They're getting hungry.
And what does Mormont say?
Jorah walks up to her. He says, they're not, they're not,
they can't be tamed, in his like stoic voice, like his
stoic, serious voice. And ultimately show. I think the thing that this scene is meant to insinuate is, Daenerys is growing, continued, even after everything that she's been through. A common thing that we see throughout a couple of, specifically with the female characters of Game of Thrones, is their naivete towards ruling other people, and and kind of like how that ultimately is going to influence their future decisions. As far as Daenerys, ultimately. And I think it's really interesting how we see the marked differences here between Sansa and Daenerys that influences them all the way up until the final season, because as we see, Daenerys just cannot get out of the way of wanting to help people, even to the point of it being a detriment to her, as people, are either unable to or just do not want to be helped. Right now she's still in this incredibly beneficial position of being this, this liberator. She's freeing the slaves. She's bringing down the slave masters. But as we see, even as problematic as those last 2 seasons were, they do show what happens when you try to bear the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's not good ultimately at the end of the day. And the other thing that's established here, obviously, is the continuing of her relationship with Dario and the rest of her soldiers, as we see here.
I think it's a clever scene, right?
Dario.
The recast. But we talked about that ad nauseum, right? Harry, listen, they made the casting change for whatever reason. I think it worked out. I think both actors play the role, really well. So it is what it is. But I think the sequence of scenes here, just like, oh, why are we stopped? It's like Grey Worm and Dario are gambling, and it's the whole thing of holding your sword, the longest, whoever can do it. And they're both strong, right? Because they've been at it since midnight. It's clearly something like 8 a.m., whatever it is. So like, 5 to 8 hours, maybe a little bit longer, and it's one of those things where she comes up to them and puts them in the place. Like, hey, listen, Jorah is going to be riding with me, as well as the other knight. Is Barristan, right?
Yeah, Barristan.
Yeah, so Barristan, the two of them are going to be riding with me because they actually didn't make me wait. So whatever your wager is doesn't even matter anymore because I'm going to put you in the rear protecting the livestock. And so, essentially she goes, and the last person holding their sword is,
gotta find another queen to serve.
Exactly. So they both drop the sword. It ends the competition, and they get up and do what they're told. In a later scene, Dario kind of comes up and tries to win her back, by teaching her flowers and other aspects of the land she's going to rule, and pitches like, he knows the land better than her, and she's going to have to learn if she's going to have rule these people, and that's when the group stops after she's sold on this bill of goods, and she buys right into it. She's perfectly happy with the way her and Dario are interacting, and she sees the logic in learning about the people, and this is when the people Marine, it turns out they put a dead slave at every mile marker between where they are and the city.
And the city.
So.
And as she says, he's like, you will not take them down. Beforehand, I'm going to see every single one. That way I know the name that, the people who I am fighting to avenge. And once again, like I said, the Dario bit that you brought up was great because once again, it shows the two things that Daenerys has to overcome. We'll call this like in the second act of her journey, right? The way that I see the whole of Game of Thrones, we have, is again, if it is this one kind of overarching story with each one being a chapter, the first 3 seasons are Act 1, the second 3 seasons are Act 2, and then the last 2 were Act 3. And in kind of the second stage of her journey, she's both going to reinforce what it is that she was, trying to learn to accomplish within the first act, which is, trying to liberate the downtrodden and, what's it called? The downtrodden and, disengaged lower classes of the world, and also actually learn how to rule them properly so that she can be an effective ruler once she eventually makes her way back to Westeros. And I think those are both really well established here. Now let's check back in with the North, if ever briefly. We have spent a lot of time in the North last season.
Listen, there's 2 things that happen here. Egret hits John with 3 arrows, and Tormund doesn't
believe her.
Listen, at 200 yards or whatever the ridiculous, distance is.
Rabbit's eye. That
exactly.
Better damn well be dead.
If he's living, it's because you let him go, and that's essentially it,
And then we get the Fens, of course, where it introduces, like, again, it shows that, like, not everything is at peace with the wildlings, ultimately, again, kind of shaping up both sides.
This is a great antagonist for Tormund. I just love the end of the scene, and this is it, right? They're cannibals,
right?
And it's made clear because they keep talking about like, oh, all the meat down here is overfed and lazy and blah, blah, blah. And, it's like, hey, Tormund, I know we've had some differences all our lives, but, before you die, you're going to have to one day eat crow.
Yeah, it's once again reinforcing, kind of introducing the struggles of the wildlings. Again, after spending all last season with the wildlings, it's going to show.
Well, they're tribal, right? So, they're the fact is they have different beliefs and different attitudes. And like, this is a tribe of cannibals, and, they're having as much fun being south of the wall as possible because, it's like people are well fed. They have hunts and feasts and they have all this stuff. And so when they raided a village, they just, got, people that are just have a little more meat on them as compared to north of the wall. Plus, they probably haven't really been able to eat people being part of Mance's army since, they all know the White Walkers are coming and they have to band together. So there probably hasn't been that many people that they have had access to. So it's a really creepy scene to have these, like cannibals that are starving for human flesh to be sort of given free range of, the farms and villages around Winterfell, and they're just enjoying it, and they do have a mission to do. But they're taking their time, and they're, really indulging in their habits, and it's I don't know, it sets up a creepy villain for the short term that they're going to have to contend with.
Right. Well, again, like I said, it's while the Wildlings and the Night's Watch, they're both, again, the setup is done. We've gotten to know the Wildlings as characters now. They are officially prepping for war, and we check back in with the Wall. This is the first time that both Jon and Sam have been back at the Wall since they originally left all the way back in the end of season 1. So we're getting reacquainted to a few characters we haven't seen. And we saw Maester Aemon at the end of season 3, but we see Sir Alistair Thorne, Jon's favorite enemy at the Wall, back there where Jon is meeting with Sam beforehand. They're kind of recapping with each other beforehand. Sam is letting him know about Bran. Jon is kind of letting him know about the Red Wedding, kind of telling him about the last time that we saw Robb, again harkening back to the last time that those two saw each other all the way back in episode 2 of season 1, again bringing a lot of things from those first 3 seasons full circle. And Jon goes before the council and tells him everything that he saw. He's like, look, I did all these. I went undercover. I killed the Half Hand. I was with the Wildlings for a certain time, but it was all for this purpose. It was all for me to get here.
One of the best things is just like, and I did lie with a wildling.
Lie with a wildling. It's great. Oh, it's great.
Yeah, it's just the way he says it. Like, it's like he doesn't want to say it, but at the same time, he believes that he believes
that he still has committed something wrong, that he has to take some responsibility. But this right here, the thing I love about Jon's arc this season in particular is that this is finally the beginning of Jon coming into his own. After the first 3 seasons where we were kind of introduced to him as this angsty teen who didn't really know his place in the world, but just happened to be on the outside of everything that was going on, so that he was pretty far removed from the action, so he wasn't really affected the way that the rest of his family were. He wasn't like on this mad quest for revenge that ultimately ended in doom. Jon has done a lot of growing up in these last 3 seasons, and he now understands kind of the true plight that really faces all of humanity now, both with the Wildlings and with the White Walkers. And and the thing that I love so much is this is him finally coming into his own. This is finally him starting to accept the leadership role that has kind of been thrust upon him. And he's contending with these guys, very much so. He's like, look, we're sitting here, we're debating which rules I broke, but Mance Rayder is marching on us with an army of 100,000. And if we don't get our shit straight and start to prepare, we're going to be squashed. Yeah. When winter comes.
I love the response to the 100,000. It's just like, you can't even get 50 of them together without them
and he's
starting
like,
to
have
kill
you ever seen a giant, Lord Sir Janos? And that's right, because that's the other thing we're introduced to. Janos Slynn taking his place in the Wall after Tyrion fired him at the end of season 2. And Janos is there once again trying to flex. And he's like, I was the City Watch, in King's Landing. And he's like, and Jon's like, fires right back. He's like, and now you're here. You must not have been very good at your job. Look, great line.
Yeah, that's a great line. And it's one of those things, like, Jon is on trial for the most part, and like he's able to zing this guy who just arrived, and it's because he's overplaying his position. It's like he was a high position in King's Landing, and he comes here and basically thinks that he can just take a high position. And as we know, we saw Jon and the rest of the new recruits come in, and they started at the bottom. They had to work their way up. They had to earn responsibility, and that's the way that it happens in the Night's Watch. And the fact is, like, he didn't do that. He didn't earn anything, and therefore, Jon openly disrespects him, and rightfully so, because he is a Brothers of the Night Watch, and this other guy is really not. He hasn't gone through what it takes and what it means, had the same experiences as the Brothers of the Night Watch. He's just someone that's an outsider trying to take power that's not his to take.
Absolutely, yeah. Janos Slynn's story is ultimately one of just complete like backtracking and trying to appeal to people and ultimately failing. And first obviously with Cersei and the Lannisters and King's Landing, and then with Alistair Thorne once he makes his way to the Wall, and it just doesn't work out for him either way because, like you said, the Wall is one of the few places in Westeros where you actually have to earn your keep. You don't just get it by being the son of the right person or being friends with the right person, And Janos Slynn's going to learn that lesson relatively quickly, but again, it shows if you want to talk about earning your keep because Maester Aemon shows that even though Sir Alistair is acting command, Maester Aemon is still calling the shots because even though Sir Alistair tries to have Jon executed, Maester Aemon, as he says, Maester Aemon knows that Jon was doing the right thing and that Jon is telling him the truth ultimately, and he lets him go. And afterwards, again, another amazing one-liner where he's like, you have the boy told the truth, and he's like, you have this amazing ability to tell whenever anybody is lying or not. Obviously Alistair is letting his bias against Jon get in the way of his better judgment, despite the fact that he knows that what Jon's saying is more than likely true. He just hates Jon, and he's just saying, how did you gain this magical ability? He's like, I grew up in King's Landing. And I'm just like, shoot that 3, Maester Aemon. It's incredible. It's an incredible line, and it results in again another sequence that again there's so much that happens in this episode with setting up not just for this season, but where the show is ultimately going to go, that you almost forget about the Arya plot that happens at the end of this episode. And it comes in, and it's so great. It's so great.
I'll say this, speaking of great lines. And harking back to the title of the episode, Two Swords.
2 Swords.
You know what? This episode could have very well been called Two Chickens.
It could have
been. Right? Because the fact is, what happens when the Hound and Arya walk into a bar?
Walk into a tavern.
With a bunch of Lannisters.
A dog and a wolf walk into a bar. It's like the opening of a joke.
Yeah, it's listen. This scene is fantastic. In one of the weird shots of this is from a Mel Brooks movie, in my opinion. Like the Hound and Arya, their height difference. They're looking, through these perfectly cut out holes in the ivy in the woods, and they're looking at the Lannisters, including the one that stole the guy who stole Needle,
Polliver. Not long for this world.
Yeah, so they're having a conversation a la Mel Brooks style, Men in Tights or something like that, and they're looking at them, and it's like, I know that guy. He stole my sword, Needle, and the Hound just sighs. He's just like, you named your sword, and she gets defensive, and this is very interesting because Arya shows her her proper upbringing in this scene. Because she responds a lot of people name their swords, and the Hound, I'm not going to go expletive here, but the Hound basically calls them all I'll use the British term wankers, and essentially I think that's a little safer, but
every chicken in this place, amazing.
So the main thing is Arya goes and she's like, I'm going to get my sword back because he did wrong. And it's almost like this kid's logic of just what justice is. And, again, this is where she's rushing in and the Hound, doesn't want to do it because, he's a killer. He knows what walking into, a death trap is. And he doesn't, want to really exert that much energy is my take on it. But they get to the door, he confronts her, and a Lannister just opens to see what the ruckus is about.
Oh, it's great.
And the second that the Hound looks at the Lannister is it's like the moment he decides, well, this is it. It's like, I now am all in on Arya and what we're going to do to these people in the tavern.
Yes.
And so they go in, the Lannisters are obviously have their run of the place. The owner of the tavern is upset that they're sort of groping the woman that's working for him, and they're being tormented. And the Hound and Arya just go and sit across and look at them and just sit there waiting. And that's when Polliver comes over and starts having a fine conversation about those chickens.
Oh, man. And it goes exactly the way that you would think it does, where, again, he tries to get the Hound to come back with him. The Hound says, no, you're not getting me. Obviously, his famous fuck the king speech. And, Polliver is like, I heard that the Hound turned tail and ran from the Battle of Blackwater. The fight breaks, obviously he utters the famous line. The fight breaks out. The Hound pretty much kills everyone there. R.I.P. to all those poor Lannister soldiers. And then Arya, of course, again, it's brief, but it is sadistic. Just showing her more of her sadistic, messed up side. This is ultimately, I would say, the last point where she's really interesting.
I think it's very interesting because she relives, the moment where her friend, gets killed. In season
and that
2.
arc is back even better. So when they're talking at the beginning, she's like, "That's Polliver. He killed Lamy," and the Hound is like, "What the fuck's a Lamy?" And I'm like,
exactly.
I immediately thought of you when you said that, and I'm like, "Oh yes, the show's reading our mind."
Yeah, so essentially, it's like it's the one guy that basically took the fall for Gendry. That he always loved that helmet, right? Just an innocent kid that gets murdered and hides the fact that Gendry is still alive, at least from the Lannisters. And this is her moment to get Needle back and get revenge. She relives the exact moment. It's like at one point,
same lines back to him.
Yeah, exactly. She cuts his leg and then says the lines, and it's really a cathartic release for Arya, and I think it allows her to, she really has accepted this path. Like, she is a killer. Like, the other people that she had to kill. It was out of necessity. She was fleeing King's Landing. She needed to survive. She needed to do what she needed to do. In this case, this is like the first time really, where she actively made a decision, and she got what she wanted, and who knows how it makes her feel, but I think, this one is one of those ones that she's not going to regret.
Correct. Yeah, and I love the closing shot too. Obviously, besides the fact that she gets the horse that she kept bugging the Hound about, but that the camera raising up and showing that, like, they're making their way towards the Eyrie. The Hound said that he's going to bring her there because he knows that about Lysa there, and you just see like the fields of the Riverlands that are still on fire, showing that's like, okay, the immediate conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters may be over, but again, this was just act 1 of this story. There is still so much more to come, both within this season and over the course of the next 5 seasons that we're going to cover. Like I said, people, this is it. This is the final run. We're not stopping until we get to that final episode, the Iron Throne. That was the season 4 premiere. That was the kickoff. We're officially back from our nice long break that we had over the holidays. We're getting you guys Talkin' Thrones content every single Friday, that it will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Like I said, we're no longer going to be going live on YouTube, but it's not going to stop us from getting you guys the content that you deserve if you just click the subscribe button and the like button down below. That way you guys can stay tuned to all the content that we have right here on the Talkin' TV channel. Pat, where could the good people follow you on the interwebs? Hey,
listen, you can find me here at the Talkin' TV network, right? I'm just going to talk some Thrones with Dom here. Occasionally, I'll probably talk some other TV shows. Like, I know you guys are probably talking about Boba Fett, at some point. But, hey, that was a pretty good show as well. But mainly, you can also catch me at Patrick W. Huber on Instagram. I'm still threatening to post something. I one day will put something on.
Still waiting.
Yeah, hey, listen, like, it's one of those things where, like, I like the idea of Instagram. I just, it's
the actual application and usage of it. Well, it's a lot of effort.
Yeah, all the photos I do, it's like I take it on a camera and then I transfer it to a computer and I edit, and then having, where do I post it? How do I post it?
It's not like these kids with these iPhones today that just take a picture and they've got all the camera filters do the work for them.
Yeah, it's almost like, I love Instagram, but I need the, Vimeo is to YouTube as blank is to Instagram. I need that blank. And someone needs to tell me what that is. I need the professional.
I don't know if there is
photo
one of
posting
those.
app.
I don't know if there is one of those yet, but I will attempt to find it just for you, Pat. Because
maybe I just need to actually like filter my Instagram and get some followers and get inspired to really use the social media platform the way it's designed. But hey, listen, you can find me there. Maybe one day I'll post and get the motivation to do so. Otherwise, just keep listening to Talking Thrones, and that's where you'll hear my voice discussing and analyzing this fine TV show.
Yes, indeed. And we'll, of course, have you back on for a couple podcasts starting soon. We've got our top 10 worst movies of the year. That's right. We're officially kicking it off. 2021 was such a miserable year for movies. We're officially kicking off with our top 10 worst movies of the year.
Was that Iron Sky: The Coming Race? I saw the trailer for that on Amazon Prime, and it did not look good. I don't know if that's a 2021 movie though.
I'll have to check. I don't know, but don't worry. We've got plenty of bad movies to talk about. That'll be our kickoff episode. That'll be premiering on this coming Monday. That episode will officially be available. And of course, follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, as well as follow the podcast network at Official Talkin' TV Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Be sure to follow us there as well. Once again, be sure to click the subscribe button, click the like button, click the bell next to it. That way you guys get notified every time we put up new content. And we'll be back next week with one of the biggest episodes of the show. And as always, people, remember, 12 seasons in a short film. Let's battle it out for the throne. We'll see you guys next time.